Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and as we continue to have conversations in this town about what our military engagement is, in fact, in Ukraine, based on the leaked documents, what we're really doing there, how much we're spending, why we're there, why we're spending as much as we are, how about we not lose sight of the last military entanglement we had and what we're learning about how botched the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan was? Well, we do have some congressmen who are looking at that. Thank God we have a Republican majority, especially on committees like Oversight, Judiciary, and Armed Services. Joining us right now is a congressman who's on two of those three, Pat Fallon of Texas, covering Armed Services and Oversight. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I think what we've learned now with regard to the withdrawal from Afghanistan, it's worse than we expected, and I'm wondering what we can do now in terms of oversight hearings to really get to the truth. What's your committee doing?
Well, we need to look at and see really, quite frankly, what the unforced errors were. And there's a few that really just that come right out and beg questions. For one, in Afghanistan, fighting is very seasonal. So from about October, November through April, the weather is it's tough to fight in. The terrain is very unmerciful. And so there's a fighting season, and that fighting season is spring through the fall. Mm-hmm. Why in the world did Joe Biden decide to withdraw our troops in August and not give that embryonic regime in Kabul a chance to, really the best chance to survive? He pulled out at the worst possible time. He should have been pulled out in December. Why did he pull out the military first when you should be doing that last? It's another question. And then, it's a conditions-based agreement that President Trump had signed. And then he said the buck stopped with him, yet he's blaming President Trump for everything. Right. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. And the report that they put out, which sounded like a piece of propaganda, if you don't mind me saying so, Congressman, it sort of really does sort of fly in the face of logic and reason. But the president has this big fig leaf now that he's using, that all of his top military advisors said, yeah, this is the right way to go. So he wasn't going to contradict his advisors. First of all, a good leader and a good president does contradict their advisors. Just ask Abraham Lincoln. But secondly, are you buying that? Was there no one in the room that said, hey, maybe there's a better way?
No, actually, the president's absolutely lying when he says that. Because the advisors, when this happened in 2021, we had hearings on the Armed Services Committee.
Right.
And we specifically asked the CENTCOM commander, Secretary of Defense, Milley with Joint Chiefs, what did you advise? Because we had heard that the military advised the president to not ever go below 2,500 troops. That would be the minimum level to hold Kabul and Bagram. But he went along with the State Department's recommendation of going down to 600 troops. So not one military member would say that they advised the president to go down to 600. They simply said that we can't share with you what we advised the president. So what Biden's doing is he's telling yet another untruth to the American people. And that's incredibly troubling.
Speaking of untruths, I think I saw Admiral Kirby, the now spokesman for the National Security Council, say over the weekend that it's ridiculous to suggest that we left tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment back in Afghanistan. I mean, I guess technically that's true. It was hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was billions of dollars. We had given them a total of about $85 billion in assistance, and there was about $7 billion of hard equipment that was usable that was left. And, that's something that President Trump, when we pulled out of Syria, he didn't leave anything. Literally nothing was left. And that's the thing that you don't want to arm your enemies, of course, but that's something that Joe Biden did. And by the way, this report that came out, it's from the National Security Council that works for the president.
Right.
So it's like Joe.
It's a political document.
He gave himself a get out of jail free card that he wrote and signed.
All right.
It's worthless. It's absolute propaganda. You are right in labeling it as such.
So the hearing tomorrow, 10 a.m. in D.C., Chairman Comer has announced it's various inspector generals that'll be sitting there. What are you hoping to ascertain from these inspector generals at the Pentagon? Because I mean, sadly, if their job is to make sure that there's no waste, fraud, and abuse in our government, and they're in charge of the Pentagon, let's face. I mean, I love our military, but there's a whole lot of waste, fraud, and abuse going on in that building.
Oh, clearly, my job and our job in Congress is to get the best use out of every single tax dollar that we take in, because if you want to make, I believe in limited government, low taxes, reasonable regulation. So we have to be highly efficient, and the Pentagon hasn't been synonymous with high efficiency, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But what the IG report is, it's not going to be a sycophantic get out of jail free card. They're going to look, and that's their job, is to take a hard look at what happened, so it doesn't reoccur. And so those are the questions that I want to ask the IG tomorrow. And I already know the answer, but let's talk about it and have the Biden administration try to defend this.
Right.
Is fighting in Afghanistan seasonal? What's the worst time to pull out? Oh, probably around August.
Yeah.
What are the minimum troop levels? What did the military advise the president? And have the IG come out and say that. So it's because if I say it, Biden just, and people like me, they're just going to dismiss it as, oh, that's partisan. It's not. There's something called the truth, Mr. President. And that's what we're going to focus on tomorrow.
If I could throw one in there, use it if you want. Would it be objectively wiser to use the military air base that we constructed out of nothing, that was completely fortified, instead of actually closing it down and using the civilian airport in the middle of the city that is completely unprotected, well, except for our friends the Taliban providing security? That still seems like a pretty big mistake, sir.
That was a massive mistake. And then once you went down, that was really the death knell to the withdrawal, is when you went down below 2,500 troops and went down to that 600. And then we had 5,000 bad guys being held at Bagram. And then they break out. Yeah. And I did ask Secretary Austin, I said, can you guarantee the American people that none of those 5,000 that broke out of prison were involved in killing 13 American service members? And his answer was, no, I cannot guarantee that. So that's very telling as well.
You mentioned General Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's announced his retirement. President Biden is now contemplating who his replacement might be. Who do you think it should be? And actually, knowing how this president works, is there any doubt that it's going to be sort of one of those check the boxes kind of announcements?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to answer the question for this reason, because anybody that I say, they probably won't appoint.
That's fair.
What I'm looking for is somebody that's not a Democratic general or a Republican general. I want an American general or an American admiral. Somebody that, like Schwarzkopf, McCarthy. I didn't know their politics, and I didn't care. They were about projecting lethality and military might across the globe, and that's what we really should be looking for in a new leader.
If I could ask you another question, Congressman Fallon, here in our final minute, it involves national security, and it's part of the Oversight Committee. This announcement from Chairman Comer that now it's 6 members of the Biden family who have received, in his words, exorbitant amounts of money for the Biden family enterprise, including money from the Communist Party in China. What more can you tell us about that? And at what point do we need to start leaning on the Justice Department? They've been investigating this stuff for years now, and nothing's coming out of that U.S. attorney in Delaware.
Yeah, no, they're dragging their feet, and that's very clear. We have always said that we're simply going to go where the evidence leads us. The problem is, the more evidence we find, the more troubling it becomes. We always thought that there were 150 SAR, suspicious activity reports, that had been filed by financial institutions on the Biden administration, or on the Biden family, rather. And by the way, it wasn't 150. It's now looking more like 250. So is it 250, or is it going to be even more?
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, all the evidence points to the influence peddling and corruption was the Biden family business.
Yeah.
And we need to hold them to account.
Hallie Biden, Hunter Biden's sister-in-law and girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, she received money. She's a public school counselor.
It makes no sense. And by the way, their excuses and their explanations beg even more questions. When you're starting up a firm and you're raising capital, that goes into the business. Yet, unless you're Hunter Biden, because then when you start a firm, as they said in their story was, well, it was just startup capital that he got to keep.
Yes.
That's insane. That's not how you build.
Quite a deal. Although, if anyone wants to offer me some of that startup capital, I'd be more than willing to. No, I don't want an investigation. They'd actually come down on me. Thank you, Congressman Fallon. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.